Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Tinsley, and I want to welcome you to week 2 of English 111 here at Central Virginia Community College. I hope week 1 went well for you. If you're having any issues, any questions, anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me at my email address, which is found on the syllabus. Hey, we're into week 2 already. Can you believe it? I mean, this semester is going to go fast. So, my encouragement to you is not to get behind. Keep yourself on top of your reading, keep yourself on top of your assignments. Because if you don't, you're going to quickly get behind. It's going to be hard to catch up. This week, we're reading chapters 1 and 2 in your textbook, Everything's an Argument. And today, we're going to be talking about the argument, part 1 of the argument. And so I want to jump right into that. I'm assuming by the time that you watch this in your read, listen, do model that you've already read the chapters. If you haven't, go ahead and stop, read the chapters 1 and 2. They're not long, and then come back and listen to this, okay? But if you've read it, let's move. If you read those chapters, let's move on. And let's talk about argument. Your book is entitled Everything's an Argument. And the question is everything truly an argument? So what I want you to do is just think of something that isn't an argument. Take a second. Maybe think of something that's not an argument. I want you to ask yourself, why is it not an argument? All right? Seriously, do this. Think of something that is not an argument. Why is it not an argument? If you need to pause the recording right now, go ahead and do so. Now, why might someone else say that what you're thinking about is an argument? If you need to pause, go ahead and do so. Could you think of anything? You know, we can oftentimes think of things and we'll say, this is an argument, this is not an argument. But if we really dig deep, there's a sense of truth to what your authors are saying. Let's look at some examples. For example, we would say, is this an argument? And at first glance, you'd say, no, it's a hat. But is it just any hat? What kind of hat is this? Well, if you're a baseball fan, you know this is one of the caps for the Washington Nationals Major League Baseball team. And you'd say, still, it's not an argument, it's a hat. It's a Major League Baseball team, but it's still a hat. However, if I'm wearing this hat, am I making an argument? Or could I potentially be making an argument? I guess I could be wearing the hat unbeknownst to what's on my head, but I could still be making an argument, at least a passive argument, right? Because what am I saying when I wear this hat, whether I know I'm saying it or not? I'm a fan of the Washington Nationals. The Washington Nationals are the best team in baseball. The Washington Nationals are my team. The Washington Nationals are going to win the World Series again, right? I might be making those arguments. So there's a sense that even a hat like this could be an argument. You say, well, Professor, you're kind of stretching things a little bit. Well, maybe so. But there's a sense and an argument to be made, right? What about this? Is this an argument? And the first thing we would detect about this is that it is a political cartoon. We see on the left there Donald J. Trump, our current president. We see on the right Adolf Hitler, a dictator from world history. Top it says Celebrity Apprentice. And I think most people would agree that clearly this is an argument. It says there Donald Trump is saying, close down the mosques, make the Muslims carry special IDs. And Adolf Hitler saying, you're hired. Now, what argument is being made here? Well, clearly it's an argument, an anti-Trump argument, right? I do want to hit pause here for a second. Me hit pause and say I'm not going to try to push any political viewpoints on anybody in this class. I'm not going to push a Democratic platform or a Republican platform, a conservative platform or a liberal platform or anything in between. My job here is to teach you composition. Now, I will put different things up during the semester. Some may be more of a liberal bent, some may be more of a conservative bent. I'm not giving you a political viewpoint here. I'm just simply putting something up as a talking point. This struck me as kind of a witty, and when I saw it for the first time a couple years ago, and so I thought I'd share it with my class as a discussion point on, is this an argument? Okay, back to our discussion. If you know, Donald Trump, before he became president, had a show called The Celebrity Apprentice, where he hired and fired people, da 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 da. You all probably know the show better than I do. However, when you look at this cartoon, it's definitely anti-Trump, because he's saying close down the mosques, make the Muslims carry special IDs, and he's holding up the Nazi salute, isn't he? Which is a very fascist thing to do. And not a very endearing. This is not doing the Nazi salute is not going to endear you to anyone. And to have Adolf Hitler say you're hired is not something most of us would want. And so this is clearly making an argument against Donald Trump's statements some years ago about Muslims and mosques, etc., about Islam. So you can see here that this is a very powerful argument, and political cartoons can be very powerful arguments and make a point in just one frame, right? What about this? Is this an argument? Students should not be allowed to take out student loans from the U.S. government because doing so, one, is a burden on the American taxpayer, and two, causes them to incur huge debt that often takes a considerable part of their lifetimes to repay. Well, clearly this is an argument, right? And this is what we typically think of when we think of an argument: some statement and some assertion followed by evidence, or at least main points. So clearly an argument here. What about this? Is this an argument? This was a very famous Corona beer advertisement that you would see in magazines and periodicals, and even online some years ago. The question is this an argument? And I think it clearly is. Marketing is an argument, is it? When marketers market whatever they use, whether it's words or pictures or videos or whatever combination thereof, they're trying to get you to buy their product. They're trying to argue that their product is worth your money, is worth you purchasing. So clearly this is an argument. Look at some of the elements of this argument. I just want to go through them real quick. We would discuss this in class if we were together, but unfortunately we're not. But we're sitting on a beach, beautiful environment, clear skies, or just high clouds in the sky, beautiful scenery. We've got a rock formation out off the coast a little bit. We've got this Corona beer on the arm of a chair, which means this is a first-person view. It's like I'm sitting in the chair. There's a beer on the arm. The beer is open. It's ready for me to drink. It's golden and beautiful. The bottle is sweating, which means it's cold. Do you see the scene that's being set here? For beer lovers, this is it. This is a fantasy world. This is the place you want to be. Cold beer, beautiful weather, beautiful scenery, beach environment, warm day. It's supposed to make you thirsty, so you'll go out and buy a case of Corona, right? Absolutely, this is an argument. And marketeers make these kind of arguments every single day, and are very successful in these arguments because marketing generates, research shows that marketing generates millions and millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars annually for businesses. So, hey, absolutely marketing works. I usually ask, is this an argument? It's just a picture of the Louvre Museum in France, in Paris. And it just looks like a picture, but you know, if this were on a brochure for the Louvre or for Paris, it might attract people. It might say, hey, I want to go see that. And you see the glass pyramid there that actually underneath this courtyard is like a mall, if you've ever been to the Louvre. And those pyramids, there's more than one of them. You can see a smaller one to the right of the large one, and a part of one to the left of the large one. These let light down into the mall underground. But anyway, that's kind of an aside. Could this be an argument? Sure, it could be. I mean, if someone says, hey, look at that, that's a beautiful picture of the Louvre. Oh, I want to go see the Louvre. Then an argument has been made. If this is used in marketing or a brochure, could be an argument. So as you can see, as we go through these examples, virtually anything in the right context, used in the right way, could be an argument. So you might not agree with your authors that everything's an argument, but we can certainly agree that lots of things are an argument. Lots of things that maybe we wouldn't consider normally as arguments might very well be just that. Okay? So expand your mind a little bit. Think about it. Think outside the box a little bit as you go through this class. Again, we're working on critical thinking just as much as we're working on our ability to write papers. So expand your definition of an argument a little bit. And here's our definition that we're going to use in this class. What is an argument? It's spoken, written, or visual text, right? So I hope I've shown you that. We didn't get a chance to discuss it in class. We missed that whole benefit. I apologize for that. But again, we are where we are this semester. But spoken, written, or visual text that expresses some point of view. It uses evidence, reason, ethics, and or emotion and tries to convince or persuade. So let's talk about that real briefly. Spoken, written, or visual text that you express a certain point of view, some point of view that you have, an opinion, whatever, and you use evidence, facts, data, reason, logic, ethics, right and wrong, and or your emotional appeal to try to convince or persuade someone to your point of view. All right, so that's a pretty comprehensive definition, and that's the one we'll use for this semester. If you need to pause and write this down, that's fine. Do so. So why do we argue? Let's go back. We're trying to convince or persuade. So what is convincing and what is persuading? Well, convincing, they're a little different. They're nuanced. Convincing is when we try to get somebody to understand, to rightly or maybe wrongly perceive something. We want to change the person's mind. However, when we persuade, we want to take it one step further. We want people to act. We want them to make decisions. We want them to explore. We want them to do something. Convincing, I'm just changing mind. Persuasion, I'm changing behavior. And folks, I want you to know that most arguments are persuasive. People want to change your behavior. They want you to act in a certain way or stop acting in a certain way. They want you to make a different decision. They want to explore another arena. Sure, it's great to convince people, but most people who are making an argument want to take it a step further and they want you to do something. This is why we have to critically think, because people are trying to manipulate our behavior in this world. They want us to do something different than we're doing now. And we want to be good critical thinkers so that if we do change our behavior, we know what we're doing and we're not just being led around by a nose ring, as it were. Okay? We don't want to be manipulated and controlled. We want to be in control of our own decisions, right? So remember, when people are making arguments, 9 times out of 10, we'll say, they're trying not just to change your mind, convince you, but to change your behavior, persuade you, okay? Let's talk about the different kinds of arguments. Now, in your book, you were introduced to stasis theory. And stasis theory was based on questions designed to help the Roman and Greek citizens organize their thoughts and develop their arguments. And if you look at these 4 basic questions in stasis theory, they kind of build upon each other in a sense, or go from a lower level of complexity to a higher level of complexity down the page. In other words, let's start with the simplest of all arguments. Did it even happen? Did something happen? We call this today the argument of fact. And when you go into a court, for example, this is the type of argument that's being made. Did the person commit the murder or not? Did the person steal the car or not? Did it happen? It's a really simple argument to make. You just look at the facts and you determine, did this thing happen or did it not happen? Now, I say it's a simple argument. I'm not saying it's simple to prove an argument of fact or to evidence an argument of fact. What I'm saying is, of the different types of arguments, this is the simplest in theory. Okay, because all I got to do is determine if something happened or it did not happen. All right, again, this is the lawyers really, especially criminal lawyers, this is how they make their money. They're in court making arguments of fact all the time. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Global climate change debate has elements of argument of fact in it. Is global climate change happening or is it not happening? The old creation versus evolution debate. Were we created by God or were we not created by God? Did we evolve from single-celled organisms or did we not evolve from single-celled organisms? Okay, so argument of fact, simplest in theory. We go up a little bit in complexity when we get to the second type of argument, which is the argument of definition. What is its nature? Okay, we're trying to define something. This is a little more difficult because definitions can be a little nebulous at times, right? But we're just trying to define it. For example, abortion. When is a baby a baby? When is a human life form deserving of its constitutional rights? Well, we've got to define what a baby is. We've got to define what life is, right? So what is its nature? Or God versus gods versus atheism. In other words, what is God? Is God a single monotheistic being or is God a pluralistic being? Is God in everything? Is God apart from everything? Or is there no God at all? See, we've got to define what this term God or divine being is, or divinity is, right? So that's a little more difficult argument, as you can see. Defining things is not easy. But let's go up. Maybe you could argue this is more complex or less complex, but let's go up to the next, we'll just say to the next question, the next argument, which is the argument of evaluation. What is its quality or cause? Okay. What is its quality or cause? How good or bad is it? Or what made it happen? What made it come about? Well, that can be so we're analyzing things, evaluating things, right? This can be a very difficult argument to make. Think about global climate change. I mean, arguments are being made daily in the scientific journals about global climate change. Is it a real problem? Is it not a real problem? Why is it? Or is it anthropogenetic? Is it caused by man or is it not caused by man? Is it caused by cyclical cycles in nature? It's difficult to know where global climate change came, how bad it is. That's another argument of quality, right? I mean, is it really that bad? Or are we blowing it out of proportion? Or is it truly going to end humanity in the next 3 generations? This is the argument. And arguments of quality or cause are extremely difficult. Are we in a time of economic decline or prosperity? We're hearing lots of debates about that now in the political realm. Well, that's an argument of quality or cause. Not an easy argument to make. Probably should update my sample a little bit, but if you remember the Charlottesville incident of a couple years ago, what were the reasons behind that? Is it truly a bunch of racist folks, white people, trying to just maintain the statues and the racist iconographs of our culture? Or is it people that are just trying to maintain heritage and symbols of the Commonwealth of Virginia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? I mean, I'm not making a judgment on that or an opinion. I'm just saying, what are the reasons behind it? It's difficult. It requires an argument of evaluation. We've got to study it. We've got to dig into it. We've got to talk to people. We've got to read articles. We've got to really study it to understand. And even then, we're never going to completely understand things like human behavior, economic decline, global climate change. These are difficult questions, and they are they're called arguments. When we make arguments based on these, we call them arguments of evaluation. And then the fourth question in stasis theory, which we now call the argument of proposal, is what action should be taken? Okay, so based on all of the evidence and that we gather on a certain position that we're taking on anything, what do we want people to do? In other words, this is part of persuasion, right? What do we want people to do? So global climate change, what are we going to do to curb it? If the temperatures are rising, then what are we going to do to bring the temperatures back down? And this, quite possibly, is the hardest argument to make, because whenever we're in the realm of persuasion, when we're trying to change human behavior, we've got to be very persuasive, don't we? Most people take some convincing to change their behavior. Most of us like to maintain the status quo in our lives. We don't want to change too much. So if we are going to change people's mind, we're going to have to work hard at it. If we're going to change people's behavior, we're going to have to work hard at it. And so this is quite possible. I usually say argument of proposal is one of the hardest arguments to make, but it's one of the most important arguments to make because, again, most of the arguments that others make are arguments of proposal, which means probably that most of the arguments we make are going to be arguments of proposal to some extent. Right? Okay. I know I've not done a perfect job of explaining that, and it's a lot easier to explain it when we can have some discussion in class. And you can ask some questions. But if you have a question, shoot it to me on email. Let's talk about it. Okay. There are 3 basic ways that we appeal to people when we're making an argument. All right. We can make an argument using pathos, ethos, or logos. Pathos is when we appeal to people's emotions. When we say things like, don't drive the car so fast or you might die. We're playing to that emotion of self-preservation, fear, right? Or eat your food because there are starving children in Africa. We're playing to that emotion of guilt. Okay, so you've probably had a parent or a friend play on your emotions before, maybe an authority figure play on your emotions before, a friend play on your emotions before, right? We know what that's about. And we've probably, most likely, played on other people's emotions, haven't we? Oftentimes we make our arguments by appealing to emotions. We can also appeal to people's ethics, their sense of right and wrong. Don't drive that car fast because it's against the law. In other words, we know the law says we should do or should not do certain things. Speeding is one of the things we're not supposed to do. And so don't drive your car fast because you're breaking the law. You're doing wrong if you do. So we're appealing to ethics there. Eat your food because you don't want to be wasteful. Playing on that ethic of good stewardship, frugality, right? Then we can also appeal to people's logic or reason, which we call logos. Don't drive your car fast because you could get in an accident, which is going to cost you a lot of money in car repairs, could cause injury to you or others, and might result in time away from work. Do you see the logic in that? So I'm trying to appeal to this person's logical side. Don't drive the car so fast. Look at all the things that could happen if you do. Or eat your food because if you don't, you're going to be hungry later, right? That's logical. That's not appealing to my ethics. That's not appealing to my emotions. That's appealing to, hey, man, hunger is a part of life. And if you don't eat now, you're going to be hungry later. Okay, so pathos, emotions, ethos, ethics, logos, logic. These are the 3 basic ways that we appeal to audiences when we're making an argument and how others appeal to us when they're making arguments. Now, there's this idea of KAIROS, and your book talks about this. KAIROS, and I'll just go ahead and read the quote directly from the book, is a term used to describe the most suitable time and place for making an argument and the most opportune ways of expressing it. All right? Term used to describe the most suitable time and place for making an argument and the most opportune ways of expressing it. Okay. Bottom line, the right place at the right time. Right? You're making the right argument at the right place at the right time. It's contextualizing your message. It's the wisdom of application. It's seizing the opportunity. In other words, it's seeing when the best time is to make an argument and making the argument at that time. It's not always the best time to make arguments on certain things. For example, right now is a great time to start making political arguments because we're in an election year. When whoever wins the presidency here in November, that's not the time to start making your appeals to people's logic or emotion or ethics on who to elect for president because the election's over. So KAIROS is knowing when is the right time to make your pitch, as it were, and make it at that time. Some examples. Ronald Reagan, president back in the 80s, if you'll remember, he had a famous speech called where he stood in front of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin and made his speech to Mr. Gorbachev where he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Well, that was so opportune because communism was starting to collapse at the time, The world was poised to tear down the Berlin Wall. If you don't know that history, I'd encourage you to go back and read it. And so Reagan knew that. So he stood in front of that wall. The world was poised for Soviet communism to fall and for the wall to be torn down. And he stood in front of the wall. He said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. What an opportune time. He was applying good KAIROS there. Or when Kennedy at Stanford University said, we go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. He knew that because the Russians had beat us to space, because the Russians were ahead of us in the space race, he knew that Americans were scared. So when he commissioned us to go to the moon by the end of the 1960s, it was the right time. He was playing to emotions, he was playing to logic, he was playing to ethics, he was playing to everything. And guess what? July 1969, we landed the first 2 men on the moon. And then, of course, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Right after a major battle at Gettysburg, lots of people had died. Lincoln knew this was the time to deliver the Gettysburg Address about freedom and freeing Americans from the bondages of slavery. And so he delivered the Gettysburg Address. Right place, right time. That's KAIROS. All right. If you need to pause the recording and take a little break, that's fine. If you want to drive on, I'm going to drive on. This is our lecture on pathos. I want to talk more directly about this appeal to emotion. Emotional appeals. What are they? Well, emotional appeals stir the emotion of both the speaker and writer and the audience, or at least they should. If you're going to make a good emotional appeal, then it should stir you first. If it doesn't stir you first as the speaker writer, then how in the world do you think it's going to stir your audience? And so I tell students this all the time. If you're going to make an emotional appeal or you're going to use emotional appeal, pick a topic, pick a subject, pick an assertion, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, that you're really passionate about so that you can pour your emotion into it. Because the more you can pour your emotion into it, the more your audience will feel it and have potentially be convinced or persuaded. Emotional appeals also add flavor to other types of appeals, such as logos and ethos. You know, ethical arguments can be boring and so can logical, but if I throw some emotion in there to kind of flavor up those logical appeals and those ethical appeals, it can make them more powerful. And hey, let's face it, emotion is powerful in the court of public opinion. We see that every day on social media and other places. If we can stir people's emotions, we can stir people up, can't we? That's why, as a transition, a segue, that's why we have to think about the ethos, the ethics of pathos, all right? The ethos of pathos. We've got to be ethical in our application of pathos because it is powerful, because emotion can be very powerful. So emotional appeals should be used very cautiously. They should not be used to manipulate people unjustifiably. You know, we shouldn't guilt people into things. That's not ethical, right? We shouldn't play on people's compassion in order to get what we want. I know we do that sometimes, but it's really not ethical to do that, is it? Ethical appeals should not be motivated by hate or prejudice. Unfortunately, we see a lot of that in our culture today. Emotions motivated by hate, prejudice. And though their emotional appeals may be very powerful when they're laced with hate or prejudice, they're not ethical. And then, of course, our emotional appeals should not be exclusionary, shouldn't exclude people or be greedy in any way. I mean, these are high standards, aren't they? Don't manipulate, don't have hate or prejudice be a part of it, don't be exclusionary or greedy. But honestly, we've got to think like this. If we're going to use emotional appeal, we've got to use it in an ethical manner. Otherwise, we can use something very powerful for bad. And I don't think any of us want to do that, right? Okay. I have a hard time on the system that I'm using playing videos and recording them. So I'm going to ask you to click on this link. I'll provide the link to you as part of your module. So you can click on this link. So I'd ask you now to pause the recording in just a minute and click on this link in your module 2. and watch it. Watch the video. It's a few minutes long. It's not real long. And I want you to ask yourself these questions as you're watching it. What were some of Terry Collins' emotional appeals? Was he effective in appealing to the viewer's emotions? Why or why not? And what were some of the ways he went over the top with his emotions? So he's making some emotional appeals. I want you to look at those. So answer these three or four questions here, and pause, and then come back and hit play again when you've watched it and answered these questions. Go ahead and do that. Okay. Hopefully you had a chance to watch the little video clip. What were some of Terry Collins' emotional appeals? Did he make any? I've made quite a few, didn't he? And I'll let you decide what those were. Since we can't discuss in class, I'm not going to try to go through all of those. But you could see where he was very passionate about what he was talking about the players. He was obviously very confrontational with the reporters. And I remember at one point, right, I'll give you one example. He says, don't judge I'm paraphrasing, but he says, don't judge these players. They're great baseball players, all of them. You shouldn't judge them because you couldn't do what they're doing. He's talking to the reporters. You couldn't do what they're doing, so don't judge them so harshly. That's an emotional appeal. He's playing on that sense of rightness and fairness and kind of guilt that these reporters should feel for overly judging these players who are all great players. They wouldn't be in Major League Baseball. And he's saying, how could you judge them? You're nowhere near their skill level, right? So that's an emotional appeal. And he makes a lot of those during the session or during the video. Was he effective in appealing to the viewer's emotions? Why or why not? Now, you have to answer that. Was he effective for you or not? For me, he was. Because, I'll talk about that in a minute. But for me, he was. Because I could see the passion, right? I knew he meant what he said. He was feeling the frustration. He was feeling the justice for his players. And so, hey, I felt it with him. Did he go over the top at any point? Probably. And my biggest and greatest example of that is when he walks off at the end. He goes, I'm done. And he walks off, right? So, but you answer these questions. I wish we could talk about these in class, but hopefully you saw that he made some emotional appeals. He was effective in some ways, and in other ways maybe a little over the top, or we might say ineffective. Why are emotional appeals so important? Well, they first of all, as we saw with I got to go back and look, Terry Collins, the manager of the Mets. We see that they show the humanity of the speaker or the writer, right? We're all human. And people want to see that humanity. And emotional appeals bring that humanity out. And people can experience you as a human being. Or when you're listening to an argument, you can experience the speaker or the writer as a human being. And that's important because we want to make connection with people. Our life is about relationship. We want to relate with other people, whether we know it or not. And when we see an emotional appeal, we see the person. And therefore, it makes a connection with the audience, doesn't it? It brings the power and persuasion to the equation, as we've talked about. Emotional appeals are powerful in the court of public opinion. They can help sustain an argument, make things more meaningful or memorable. Research shows that if you can tie an emotion to a fact or an argument, it makes that fact or argument more memorable, and people will be able to recall it later easier. So, and then, as we've said, emotional appeals capitalize on the powerful force in every human being, and that is our feelings. Now, is humor a good use of emotional appeal? And the quick answer is yes, absolutely. It can put an audience at ease. It can allow the speaker-writer to make more of a connection with the audience. It can help a speaker-writer deal with sensitive or difficult issues. We see comedians do this a lot. It can keep the audience off of the offensive or the defensive, right? I mean, oftentimes humor can very much diffuse a tense situation. We've seen that before, right? Again, can show a bit of humanity on the part of the speaker or writer, and it can be just plain fun. So, yes, humor can be effective as an emotional appeal. However, be careful with humor. Be careful not to ridicule. Because ridicule is immature, isn't it? We don't want to just make fun of people. That's immature. And ridicule doesn't deal with real issues, and it's just mean. Also, when you're thinking about humor, make sure you can use humor properly, because people who try to use humor but are not very humorous people often fall flat on their faces, don't they? All right. So let's summarize by talking about the 3 keys to emotional appeal. First, KAIROS. Consider KAIROS. In the Terry Collins press conference, it was effective because, I think, because it came right after a big loss. And so it was effective at that point. Secondly, don't go over the top. Be controlled, be respectful. Yelling and screaming at people is rarely effective. Name calling and ridicule rarely wins a hearing with us. So be respectful. And then thirdly, deal with the issues. Don't simply rant. For example, when I rant, I might say something like this: I hate racism and racists. They are idiots, bigots, and evildoers. And you may agree with that. I may agree with that. However, as soon as I get into name calling and using words like hate, I turn people off, even people who agree with me, because I'm ranting. But if I can say the same thing, dealing with the issues. And here's an example. Racism is a scourge on America. It sets groups of people apart from one another and encourages violence and hatred. We should counter racism whenever we can. Racism should not stand in a civilized society. Now, see how balanced and effective that is? We all agree with that, right? I hope we do. We all agree with that. It's not name calling. It's not ranting. It's not using overly hyperbolic words like hate. It's saying, you know what? Racism is horrible for America. It sets people apart. It encourages violence. We should counter it. And it just has no place in our society. Boom. Effective argument, right? Extremely effective. So because why? Because it deals with the issue in a balanced, respectful way. Okay? So consider KAIROS, be respectful, deal with the issues. Okay, as a practical exercise, you can do this if you want. I would encourage you to do it. Write a paragraph where you make an emotional appeal about a topic that is near and dear to your heart. Here's some ideas. I won't read them. You can read them there. But take a few minutes and just write about something. Stream of consciousness. Don't worry about what you're writing. Just pause right now and write about one of these issues or any issue that you want to. Just something that's near and dear to your heart. Go ahead and pause and do that. Okay. Hope you did that, and wish I could look at them, read them, and get. I don't usually read them in class. What we do is we'll have 2 or 3 people read theirs, but you don't have to do that because we're doing this remotely. But you do have to do the homework. This week we are choosing our topic for the first paper. So let me go over this briefly. You can choose any topic you wish. Now I have to say this like 1,000 times every semester, but I'll say it again. You can choose any topic you wish. Sky's the limit. Whatever you want to write about. You can write about anything you want. You say, can I write about this? You can write about anything you want. However, the topic should lend itself to a good old-fashioned emotional appeal. I want to see and hear your emotion in this paper. Now, I'm not saying I don't want you cursing, and I don't want you going over the top and being hyperbolic. What I'm saying is I want you to try to appeal to my emotion as the reader. It can be an expansion of the practical exercise that you just did, or you can do something completely different, okay? But the final essay will contain these things, and I'll go over them here in an introductory paragraph with a clear thesis. We're going to talk about a thesis in a minute. The second thing is you're going to have, I keep forgetting to take this out. You need to have 3 body, not 2 or 3, but 3 body paragraphs, and you need to have a concluding paragraph. That's a 5-paragraph essay. Introduction, 3 body paragraphs, that's 4, and a conclusion, that's 5. Okay, so that's your minimum. This paper is going to be 4 to 5 pages in length, double spaced, 12-point font, Times New Roman or Courier New. 1-inch margins. I may have said that already. Basic 5-paragraph paper. Okay, I want to come back to the introduction. the three body paragraphs each paragraph should contain a main point. Let me start with the introduction. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Introduction, a thesis statement. What is a thesis statement? A thesis statement is your summary statement of what you're going to talk about in the paper. A thesis statement contains two basic things. It contains a topic and it contains an assertion. A topic is just that overarching thing you're going to talk about. The assertion is the specific claim that can clearly be defended. It's not an opinion. You're not saying I think or I believe or I, in my opinion, blank, blank, blank. That's not it. You're making an assertion, a claim. You're going to boldly make your claim, and then you're going to defend it in the paper. For example, here's a good thesis statement. The Charlottesville incident was a horrible and reprehensible example of our nation's current state of disunion. Well, obviously, my topic is the Charlottesville incident. I'm talking about that Charlottesville incident that happened a couple years ago. And my assertion is that it demonstrates our current state of disunion in America. And also that it was a horrible and reprehensible example of our nation's current state of disunion. So my assertion is that I'm going to show you in this paper how the Charlottesville incident shows how our country is in upheaval. It's in disunion. It's fallen apart. Okay? A bad thesis statement is, I hate the Charlottesville incident happened. Well, that's an opinion. I hate it happened too. But you can't prove that you hate something. That's just an opinion, right? There's no way to prove that you hate something. Do you see the difference? I can show logically, emotionally, I can show maybe even ethically, making different appeals that that our state, our nation is in disunion. And the Charlottesville incident can show us an example of that, is a clear object lesson of that. Okay? I hope that's as clear as mud. Then you're going to come up with your three main points. So what are the three things you're going to show about the Charlottesville incident that show disunion? Right? So if I say that the Charlottesville incident shows disunion in our country, then what are the three things about the Charlottesville incident, the three events maybe in the Charlottesville incident that show disunion, or that can be evidence of disunion in our country? And those become my main points. And each one of my main body paragraphs contains one of those main points. And then my concluding paragraph just simply restates my main points in my thesis statement. It wraps up the paper and gives a commission or next steps. What should I do now that with this information now that I have it? Now, I know that all this is new, and this is not our lecture on how to write a 5-paragraph essay. But what I do need you to do for this week is identify what your paper is going to be about. So when you there's part of this week's assignments is to take a little quiz. You get a few points for it. They're extra credit points, by the way. But you're going to take a little quiz, and it's going to ask you two basic questions. What's your topic, and what's your assertion or your claim? So you need to tell me what your overarching topic is and what your what your specific claim is. So let's say you're writing on abortion. So, okay, your overarching topic would be abortion. What's your specific assertion? Maybe your assertion is abortion should be illegal. Or maybe you're saying abortion should continue to be legalized. That's your assertion, right? That's all I need you to do this week, is to give me a good topic and a good assertion. I will give you feedback after you've done that. After this week 2 is over, I will give you feedback to say, hey, this is a good topic. This is not so good of a topic. This is well, I probably won't comment too much on your topics, but I will comment a lot on your claims. Some of you will knock it out of the park. You know what I'm talking about when I say an assertion or a claim. Some of you are going to struggle with this, but please take my suggestions and I will help make you a better writer. Please don't resist the process in this class. Please don't resist the process in this class. If you go through the process and do the things I ask you to do, you will be successful in writing. You will become a better writer. I can almost guarantee it. Okay? Wow, that's our lecture, right? And that's about 45 minutes that we've been talking. I know I went through this material very, very quickly. it's hard for me to do these lectures like this because I'm staring at a microphone and a screen and not a body of students. So I apologize. It's not the most ideal situation. But again, it's where we find ourselves. We're going to look at this positively, and we're going to do a great job this semester of communicating with one another. I thank you for the questions that I've gotten, by the way, so far from many of you. Continue to send your questions. I'm more than happy to address them. And if we need to get on the phone and talk to each other, we'll do that. So this week, choose your topic, make your assertion, answer the questions in that quiz. Again, it's just if you get a few points for it, but they're extra credit points. And don't forget the link. You should have already looked at it, but the link for the Terry Collins video is in the module as well. All right. All right, folks. It's been great talking to you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'm here for you. Help you any way I can. Have a great week.